My name is Everly Thompson. I'm 34 years old, and I used to believe that marriage was built on trust and honesty. For 9 years, I thought I had the perfect life. A beautiful suburban house with a white picket fence, a husband who sold insurance, and our precious 7-year-old daughter Emma, who was the brightest, most curious little girl you could imagine. I worked as an elementary school teacher, spending my days helping children learn and grow, believing that honesty was the foundation of everything good in life. But sometimes the most beautiful facades hide the ugliest truths. It was a Tuesday evening in October when I heard something that would shatter my world forever. Before I share what happened that night, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button if you're a parent who values honesty above all else, and don't forget to subscribe, because this story will show you why sometimes walking away is the bravest choice you can make for your child. Now let me take you back to that Tuesday, when my entire world changed forever. Life in our house followed a perfect routine that I had crafted over the years. Every morning at 5:30, I would wake up to the soft hum of our coffee maker preparing breakfast, while Jake read his newspaper at the kitchen table. Emma would bounce down the stairs in her pajamas, her blonde curls messy from sleep, and climb onto her chair to eat the pancakes I made shaped like butterflies. These were the moments I treasured most when our family felt complete and genuine. But lately, something had shifted in Jake's behavior. He started coming home later from work, always with explanations about meeting new clients or handling difficult cases. The insurance business was competitive, he would say, and he needed to put in extra hours to secure our family's future. At first, I admired his dedication. I trusted him completely, just like I trusted that the sun would rise each morning. However, small details began to catch my attention. There was the faint smell of unfamiliar perfume lingering on his dress shirts when I did laundry. When I mentioned it, Jake laughed it off, saying one of his female clients was a heavy perfume wearer and must have hugged him after closing a big policy. It seemed reasonable enough. Emma, with her innocent 7-year-old curiosity, started asking questions that made me pause. During dinner one evening, she looked up from her spaghetti and said, "Mommy, why does Daddy's phone buzz so much when we're eating, and why does he always whisper when he talks on it?" I watched Jake's face tense slightly before he smiled and ruffled Emma's hair, explaining that work calls sometimes came at inconvenient times, but they were important for keeping our family comfortable. My job as a second-grade teacher had always been my passion. I loved watching children's faces light up when they finally understood a new concept, and I prided myself on creating a classroom environment built on trust and open communication. The irony wasn't lost on me later, how I was teaching 25 children the importance of honesty while missing the lies growing in my own home. The first real red flag appeared when Jake forgot about Emma's school play rehearsal. For weeks, Emma had been practicing her lines as a sunflower in the fall harvest production. She was so excited for Daddy to see her perform, talking about it constantly at dinner. Jake promised he would be there, assuring her he wouldn't miss it for the world. But when I looked out into the audience that afternoon, scanning the rows of proud parents with their phones ready to record, Jake's seat remained empty. Emma's face fell when she spotted me alone in the crowd. After the rehearsal, she asked where Daddy was, her lower lip trembling slightly. That evening, Jake arrived home at 8:30 with an elaborate explanation about terrible traffic from a client meeting that ran late. He apologized profusely to Emma, promising to make it up to her. But I noticed something that didn't sit right. Jake looked perfectly composed, his clothes weren't wrinkled, and his hair wasn't disheveled like someone who had been stuck in traffic for hours. When I mentioned this observation privately later, he became defensive, asking why I was analyzing his appearance like a detective. The distance between us continued to grow. Jake started going to bed earlier, claiming exhaustion from long days. Our conversations became shorter, more surface level. He was always checking his phone, even during our family movie nights on Sundays. When it buzzed, he would glance at it with an expression I couldn't quite read, then quickly put it face down on the coffee table. Emma, sensitive child that she was, began to pick up on the tension. She became quieter during dinner, asking fewer of her usual endless questions about everything from why the sky was blue to what happened to dinosaurs. Sometimes I would catch her watching Jake and me with those big brown eyes, as if trying to figure out a puzzle she didn't have all the pieces for. The week before everything exploded, Jake was particularly distant. He claimed to have 3 different client meetings, each one supposedly more demanding than the last. He would come home with detailed stories about difficult customers and complex policy negotiations. I found myself hanging on to these explanations, desperate to believe them, because the alternative was too frightening to consider. Looking back, I realized that Emma and I had both started walking on eggshells, trying to maintain the harmony of a family that was already cracking at its foundation. We just didn't know how deep those cracks really went. The lies began to multiply like cracks spreading across a windshield. What started as small inconsistencies became glaring contradictions that I could no longer ignore, even though every fiber of my being wanted to find innocent explanations for Jake's behavior. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning when Jake announced he had to attend a weekend business conference in Chicago. He showed me the email invitation on his phone, pointing out the hotel address and the list of seminars he would attend. Emma was disappointed because we had planned to go to the pumpkin patch that weekend, but Jake promised we would go the following Saturday instead. He left Friday evening with his overnight bag, kissing Emma goodbye and telling her to be good for mommy. But when I was organizing receipts for our taxes the following Monday, I found a hotel receipt tucked between credit card statements. The hotel name was familiar, but it wasn't in Chicago. It was the Marriott downtown, just 20 minutes from our house. When I confronted Jake about the discrepancy that evening, his entire demeanor changed. Instead of the confused surprise I expected, he became defensive and agitated. "It's complicated business stuff, Everly. You wouldn't understand the logistics of these conferences. Sometimes they change venues at the last minute." His voice carried an edge I had never heard before, and he refused to meet my eyes. At school, Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, asked to speak with me during pickup. She explained that Emma had drawn a family picture during art class, but it only included the two of us. When Mrs. Rodriguez asked about Daddy, Emma had shrugged and said, "He's always working or on the phone. It's usually just me and Mommy anyway." The comment hit me like a physical blow. How had I not noticed that Emma was already learning to see our family as incomplete? How long had she been feeling like Jake was absent even when he was physically present? That Tuesday evening, Jake's phone rang during dinner, which had become a regular occurrence. He glanced at the screen, his face tightening, then stood up abruptly. "I need to take this. Work emergency." He stepped outside onto our back patio, closing the sliding door behind him. Through the glass, I could see him pacing back and forth, his free hand gesturing animatedly as he spoke in hushed tones. 20 minutes passed. Emma finished her chicken nuggets and started on her homework at the kitchen table, while I loaded the dishwasher, stealing glances at Jake through the window. When he finally returned, his cheeks were flushed from the cold October air, but his eyes held an excitement that seemed inappropriate for a work crisis. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah, just a client having second thoughts about a policy. You know how it is." He sat back down and immediately began asking Emma about her spelling test, deflecting any further questions about the call. My best friend Sarah had been dropping hints for weeks, but that Thursday she finally worked up the courage to say something direct. We were having coffee after our weekly yoga class when she leaned across the table and lowered her voice. "Everly, I saw Jake at the coffee shop on Main Street last Tuesday around lunchtime. He was with a woman I didn't recognize. They seemed very close. I wasn't going to say anything, but I can't stop thinking about Emma." I felt the blood drain from my face. Tuesday was one of the days Jake claimed to be meeting with a particularly demanding client about a large commercial policy. Sarah described the woman as brunette, well-dressed, probably in her early 30s. She said they were sitting close together, leaning in to whisper. And when the woman laughed, Jake touched her hand. That weekend, Jake surprised me with flowers and a beautiful necklace, claiming he just wanted to show me how much he loved and appreciated me. The timing felt suspicious, but I wanted so desperately to believe in his gesture that I pushed my doubts aside. Emma started having nightmares around this time, waking up crying about monsters that looked like people she trusted. One night, as I held her in my arms, she asked the question that made my heart stop. "Mommy, are you and Daddy getting divorced like Tommy's parents?" I assured her that everything was fine, but the question haunted me. How much was she picking up on? How much damage were we already doing by pretending everything was normal? The final straw in this series of lies came when Jake claimed he had to work late on a Thursday evening. I called his office around 7, planning to ask if he wanted me to bring him dinner. His secretary Janet sounded surprised when I asked to speak with him. "Oh honey, Jake left around 3 today, said he had an important appointment and wouldn't be back." I sat in my car outside Emma's dance class, staring at my phone, trying to process the blatant contradiction. There was no explaining this away with conference changes or client emergencies. This was a direct, intentional lie, and it wasn't the first one. That night, when Jake came home at 9:30 with another elaborate story about computer problems and deadline pressures, I watched him carefully. He had showered recently, his hair was still slightly damp, and he smelled like cologne instead of the office. When he kissed my cheek, I noticed his lips tasted like wine, though he claimed to have been surviving on office coffee all day. I was starting to question my own judgment, wondering if I was being paranoid or if my instincts were trying to protect me from a truth I wasn't ready to face. The evidence was building, but I wasn't prepared for how much worse things would get or how deeply the lies had already infected our family. Tuesday evening arrived with the crisp bite of autumn air and the golden light that made our neighborhood look like something from a magazine. I was supposed to attend a faculty meeting at school, but our principal had canceled it at the last minute due to a family emergency. Instead of calling Jake to let him know I would be home early, I decided to surprise him and Emma with takeout from their favorite Chinese restaurant. I pulled into our driveway at 6:15, noticing Jake's car already there, which was unusual for a weekday. Normally, he didn't get home until after 7. I grabbed the bags of food and my purse, fishing for my keys, as I approached the front door. As I turned the key quietly, not wanting to startle them, I could hear voices coming from the kitchen. Emma's sweet, high-pitched voice carried clearly through the hallway, and I smiled, imagining her telling Jake about her day at school. But as I stepped inside and closed the door softly behind me, I heard something that made me freeze in place. Emma was asking a direct question, her voice carrying that innocent curiosity that I loved so much about her. "Daddy, where were you yesterday? Mommy said you were at work, but Tommy's mom saw you at the movies in the afternoon." My heart stopped. I hadn't told Emma that Jake was at work yesterday. She must have asked where he was, and I must have given some vague response without thinking. But Tommy's mom, Mrs. Peterson, had seen Jake at the movies. Yesterday was Monday, and Jake had specifically told me he had back-to-back client meetings all afternoon. I set the food down silently on the entryway table and stepped closer to the kitchen, staying hidden behind the wall that separated the hallway from the main living area. I could see Emma sitting at the kitchen island with her math homework spread out in front of her, her pencil hovering over a worksheet as she looked up at Jake expectantly. Jake was standing with his back to me, loading dishes into the dishwasher, but I could see his shoulders tense when Emma asked her question. For a moment, the kitchen was completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then Jake turned around to face our daughter, and I watched as he looked directly into her trusting brown eyes and said the words that would haunt me forever. "Sweetheart." Tommy's mom must be confused. Daddy was definitely at work all day yesterday. "You know, I would never lie to you, right?" Something inside my chest cracked open like an egg hitting concrete. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore, though. That betrayal cut deep enough. This was about my husband teaching our 7-year-old daughter that the people who love her most are allowed to lie to her face. This was about Jake destroying Emma's ability to trust her own perceptions and instincts. But Jake wasn't finished. He walked over to Emma, ruffled her hair in that affectionate way that usually made her giggle, and continued, "Sometimes grown-ups see things and think they remember them differently than they really happened. Tommy's mom probably saw someone who looked like Daddy, but it wasn't actually me. I was in boring meetings all day, wishing I could be home with my favorite girls instead." Emma's face lit up with relief and love. "Oh, okay, Daddy, that makes sense. I'm sorry I asked. I should have known you were working hard for us." She stood up on her tiptoes and wrapped her arms around Jake's waist in one of those spontaneous hugs that children give so freely. Jake patted her back and held her close, and over her head, his face wore an expression of relief that made me feel sick to my stomach. "That's my smart girl," he said, his voice warm with false affection. "You never have to worry about Daddy lying to you. I love you too much to ever do that." I felt like I was watching our family through a sheet of glass that had just shattered. Everything I thought I knew about the man I married, about our life together, about the father he was, to Emma crumbled in that moment. I couldn't stay hidden any longer. I stepped into the kitchen, and Jake's face went completely white when he saw me. Emma turned around with a bright smile, running over to hug me. "Mommy, Daddy was just telling me about his busy day yesterday. Tommy's mom thought she saw him at the movies, but it was just someone who looked like him." I stared at Jake over Emma's head, and I could see the panic in his eyes as he realized exactly how much I had heard. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, and I could feel Emma starting to sense the tension. "Emma, honey," I said, my voice somehow steady, despite the earthquake happening inside me. Why don't you go finish your homework in your room? Daddy and I need to talk about some grown-up stuff. Emma looked between us with those perceptive eyes that missed nothing, nodded solemnly and gathered her worksheets. As her footsteps faded up the stairs, Jake immediately started talking. Everly, it's not what you think. I was protecting her from complicated adult stuff. She doesn't need to know about every detail of my work schedule. But I held up my hand to stop him, my voice coming out quieter than I expected, but carrying a weight that made him fall silent. You just taught our daughter that it's okay for people who love her to lie to her face. You looked into her innocent eyes and made her doubt her own reality. You made her apologize for asking a perfectly reasonable question. The fight that followed was the first real one of our marriage, and Emma heard every word from upstairs. When she started crying, I realized that staying with Jake would mean teaching Emma that love and lies could coexist. And that was a lesson I refused to let her learn. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying not just what I had witnessed that evening, but 9 years of marriage through a new devastating lens. Every small lie, every deflection, every time Jake had made me feel like I was overreacting or being too sensitive took on new meaning. Jake had tried to explain himself after Emma went to bed, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. Yes, he was having an affair with a coworker named Lindsay. It had started 6 months ago, just coffee at first, then lunch meetings that turned into something more. He claimed it meant nothing, that it was just a midlife crisis, a stupid mistake that he would end immediately if I would forgive him. But as he spoke, I realized he still didn't understand what had broken me. It wasn't just the cheating, devastating as that was. It was watching him lie so effortlessly to Emma, seeing how easily manipulation came to him when he thought no one was watching. You don't get it, Jake, I said, my voice hoarse from crying. I could maybe work through an affair. People make mistakes, marriages can survive infidelity, but you just showed me that lying is so natural to you that you'll do it to our 7-year-old daughter without hesitation. How am I supposed to trust you with her heart? Jake's face showed genuine confusion, as if he couldn't comprehend why lying to Emma was worse than cheating on me. I was protecting her. She doesn't need to know that I wasn't at work. It would just confuse and upset her. You were protecting yourself, I corrected. And you were teaching her that her perceptions can't be trusted, that she should apologize for asking questions, and that the people who claim to love her most are allowed to deceive her. The next morning brought the impossible task of facing Emma across the breakfast table, trying to act normal while my world had imploded. She chattered about her upcoming spelling test and asked if we could get ice cream after school, her innocent joy a sharp contrast to the devastation I felt inside. Jake left for work early, avoiding eye contact with me, and I was grateful for the space to think. But Emma, sensitive as always, picked up on the change in atmosphere. Mommy, are you sick? You look really sad. I knelt down to her level, smoothing her hair back from her face. Mommy and Daddy are having some problems, sweetheart. But it has nothing to do with you, and we both love you very much. What kind of problems? She asked, her brown eyes wide with concern. How do you explain betrayal and broken trust to a 7-year-old? How do you tell a child that their father is a liar without destroying their sense of security? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt other people, I said carefully. Daddy made some choices that hurt Mommy's feelings, and we need to figure out how to handle that. Emma nodded gravely, as if this explanation made perfect sense to her young mind. Like when I accidentally broke your favorite mug and felt really bad about it. Something like that, baby, but bigger. That afternoon, I made an appointment with Dr. Sarah Chen, a marriage counselor that my friend had recommended. I was willing to try for Emma's sake to see if there was any way to rebuild what had been shattered. Jake agreed to attend the session, arriving 10 minutes late with apologies about traffic. Dr. Chen was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s, who had a calming presence and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. What brings you both here today? She asked, and I found myself struggling to find the words. Jake jumped in immediately, taking control of the narrative. I made a mistake. I had an inappropriate relationship with a colleague, but it's over now. Everly is having trouble forgiving me, and I understand that, but I'm committed to making our marriage work. Dr. Chen turned to me. Everly, is that how you see the situation? I took a deep breath. The affair is devastating, but what broke me was watching Jake lie directly to our daughter's face. He taught her that people who love her are allowed to deceive her, and that she should doubt her own perceptions when something doesn't feel right. For the first time, I saw Dr. Chen's professional composure shift slightly. She leaned forward, her attention sharpening. Can you tell me more about this incident with your daughter? As I recounted what I had witnessed, Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. When I finished, Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Jake, do you understand why lying to Emma might be particularly concerning for Everly? Jake's response revealed everything I needed to know. I don't see why it's such a big deal. Kids don't need to know every detail about adult problems. I was protecting her. Dr. Chen's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Trust between a parent and child is foundational to healthy development. When that trust is compromised, it can affect every relationship the child has for the rest of their life. But Jake remained defensive, insisting that white lies to children were normal and that I was overreacting. As we left the session, I realized that he genuinely believed there was nothing wrong with what he had done. Over the next few days, I watched Jake interact with Emma with new eyes, and I began to see patterns I had missed before. Small lies about why he was late, about where he had been, about promises he had made. Emma accepted everything he said without question because she trusted him completely. The final breaking point came 3 days later when Emma asked Jake if he could attend her school's fall festival that Friday evening. He looked her in the eye and promised he would be there, that nothing could keep him away. But Friday afternoon, his phone buzzed during dinner, and he glanced at it with that familiar expression. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he said to Emma. "Daddy has an emergency at work and won't be able to make it to your festival tonight." Emma's face fell, but she nodded bravely. "It's okay, Daddy. Work is important." But I had seen the text message when his phone lit up. It wasn't from work. It was from Lindsay. "Can't wait to see you tonight." As I watched Emma try to hide her disappointment, putting on a brave face for the father who had just chosen his affair over her school event, something inside me crystallized into unshakable resolve. I realized I had to choose between a comfortable lie and a difficult truth. I chose truth, not just for me but for Emma. She deserved a mother who would show her that lies were not love, that she didn't have to accept deception from people who claimed to care about her. That night, after Jake left for his emergency, I sat Emma down for the hardest conversation of my life. "Emma, sweetheart, Mommy needs to tell you something important. Sometimes when people make really big mistakes that hurt others, families need to change how they live together. Daddy and I are probably going to live in different houses for a while." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she listened carefully as I explained that sometimes adults make choices that mean families need to be apart, that it wasn't her fault, and that both Daddy and I would always love her. The hardest part was knowing that I was the one causing Emma's tears in that moment, even though I was trying to protect her from years of learning that love and lies went hand in hand. When Jake came home that night smelling like wine and another woman's perfume, I told him I wanted a divorce. The next few weeks passed in a blur of difficult decisions and painful logistics that I had never imagined I would have to navigate. Meeting with a divorce attorney felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold in a sterile conference room with mahogany furniture and legal documents scattered across the table. Attorney Margaret Walsh was a woman in her late 40s with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that I found oddly comforting. She explained the realities of divorce, with children-involved custody arrangements, child support, division of assets, and the timeline for everything to become final. "In Virginia, we'll need to establish a separation period," she explained, sliding papers across the desk for me to review. "Given that you have a minor child, the court will want to see a temporary custody arrangement that serves Emma's best interests." The financial reality hit me like cold water. My teaching salary of $45,000 a year couldn't support the mortgage on our 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. I would need to find a smaller place, something more affordable, which meant uprooting Emma from the only home she had ever known. Jake's reaction to the divorce papers swung wildly between anger and desperation. Some days he would call me at work, begging for another chance, promising to go to individual therapy, to cut off all contact with Lindsay, to be the husband and father we deserved. Other days he was furious, threatening to fight for full custody and claiming I was being vindictive and unreasonable. The most painful moments came when Jake used Emma as a weapon. He began filling her head with his version of events, telling her that Mommy wanted to take her away from Daddy, that we could all be happy again if Mommy would just forgive a simple mistake. Emma came home from a weekend visit with Jake, confused and upset. "Daddy says you don't want us to be a family anymore," she said, her voice small and hurt. "He says he said sorry, and that should be enough." I knelt down to her level, fighting back tears at seeing my daughter caught in the middle of adult problems she shouldn't have to understand. Emma, sometimes sorry isn't enough to fix some kinds of hurt, but that doesn't mean anyone loves you any less. House hunting with a 7-year-old was heartbreaking. Every apartment we looked at was smaller than what Emma was used to, with thin walls and no backyard for her to play in. She sat quietly in the car between viewings, staring out the window with an expression far too serious for her age. "Will I still have my own room?" she asked after we toured a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a complex 20 minutes from her school. "Yes, baby, you'll always have your own room," I promised, though I knew it would be tiny compared to her current bedroom with its walk-in closet and window seat. At school, Emma's behavior began to change in ways that worried her teacher and the school counselor. Mrs. Rodriguez called me in for a meeting, explaining that Emma had become withdrawn during group activities and had been caught lying about small things like whether she had completed her homework or why she was late from recess. "This is very unusual behavior for Emma," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. "She's always been so honest and outgoing. I think the stress at home might be affecting her more than you realize." The irony was devastating. In trying to protect Emma from Jake's lies, I had created a situation where she was now lying herself, probably as a way to cope with the chaos in her world. Jake's parents added another layer of complexity to an already impossible situation. They had never fully approved of me thinking their son could have done better than a small-town teacher, and they saw the divorce as evidence of my failure to keep their family together. "You're destroying that little girl's life over nothing," Jake's mother said when she called to confront me. "So what if Jake made a mistake? Men do that sometimes. You're supposed to forgive and move on for the sake of your child." But my own parents surprised me with their unwavering support. My mother drove down from Pennsylvania the weekend we moved into our new apartment, helping me unpack boxes and set up Emma's new room with fairy lights and familiar stuffed animals. "You're doing the right thing, sweetheart," Mom said as we assembled Emma's new twin bed. "That little girl is watching how you handle this, and you're teaching her that she deserves to be treated with honesty and respect." Moving day was one of the hardest days of my life. Emma sat on her bedroom floor, surrounded by boxes, crying as she packed her favorite toys. Jake alternated between helping carry furniture and making passive-aggressive comments about how unnecessary all of this was. "We could have worked this out," he said as I loaded my clothes into garbage bags. "You're putting Emma through hell for nothing." But I remembered the moment I had watched him lie to her face, and I knew there was no going back. Some betrayals run too deep to forgive, especially when they involve teaching a child that deception is acceptable. Our new apartment was on the second floor of a complex that housed mostly young professionals and elderly retirees. Emma's new room faced the parking lot instead of our old backyard, with its swing set and flower garden. That first night, she cried herself to sleep, while I held her, both of us grieving for the life we had lost. The temporary custody arrangement allowed Jake to have Emma every other weekend and one evening per week. Watching her pack her little suitcase for those visits broke my heart, especially when she would ask why she had to go back and forth between houses like her toys. But the most telling moments came when Emma returned from Jake's apartment. She would be quiet and clingy, often mentioning things that didn't add up. Jake would tell her he had cooked dinner, but she would mention they had eaten fast food. He would claim they had spent the afternoon at the park, but she would ask why his friend Lindsay had been there too. I started keeping a journal documenting these inconsistencies on the advice of my attorney. It was becoming clear that Jake's relationship with honesty hadn't improved even in the face of losing his family. The hardest part was watching Emma struggle to understand why her world had been turned upside down. She was too young to comprehend concepts like emotional manipulation and trust, but old enough to feel the instability and confusion that came with our fractured family. One evening, as I tucked her into bed in our small apartment, she asked the question that broke my heart. "Mommy, why can't Daddy just tell the truth so we can all live together again?" I didn't have an answer that would make sense to a 7-year-old, so I simply held her until she fell asleep, promising myself that one day she would understand that sometimes protecting someone you love means making choices that hurt in the short term, but heal in the long run. 3 months into our new life, something beautiful began to emerge from the wreckage of our old one. Emma and I developed routines and traditions that were uniquely ours, built on a foundation of honest communication that I had never fully appreciated before. Our morning walks became sacred time. Every day before school, we would walk around our apartment complex, and Emma would tell me about her dreams, from the night before her worries about upcoming tests or random observations about the world around her. I made it a point to answer every question honestly, even when the truth was complicated or uncomfortable. "Why did you and Daddy get divorced?" she asked one crisp November morning as we watched a family of ducks swimming in the retention pond behind our building. "Because Daddy was not being truthful with us," I said simply. "And when people aren't truthful, it hurts the people who love them. I decided that you and I deserve to live somewhere where we always tell each other the truth even when it's hard." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Like when I broke your coffee mug and told you right away instead of hiding it." "Exactly like that, baby. That took courage, and I was proud of you for being honest, even though you were scared I might be mad." These conversations were healing for both of us. Emma began to understand that honesty wasn't just about big things like divorce, but about daily choices to respect each other enough to tell the truth. At school, I threw myself into my work with renewed passion. Teaching second graders about character and integrity took on new meaning as I helped children navigate their own small moral dilemmas. When Tommy forgot to do his homework and considered lying about it, I was able to help him understand that his teacher would be more understanding about honesty than deception. My classroom became a safe space for several students whose parents were also going through divorces. I understood their confusion and fear in ways I never had before, and I was able to provide comfort and stability during their difficult transitions. Emma's adjustment to our new life had its challenges, but gradually I began to see positive changes. She was sleeping better, her appetite improved, and her natural curiosity returned. Most importantly, she began to trust her own perceptions again. When Jake missed 2 scheduled visits in a row, claiming work emergencies both times, Emma surprised me with her response. "I don't think Daddy really had to work," she said matter-of-factly as we made pizza for dinner on a Friday night that was supposed to be his. "I think he just didn't want to come." A few months earlier, I would have made excuses for Jake tried to protect Emma from disappointment by supporting his lies. Now I simply said, "What makes you think that he told me he had to work late but his office closes at 5 on Fridays?" And when I called him, I could hear music playing in the background, not work sounds. I was amazed by Emma's analytical thinking and proud that she felt safe expressing her observations without fear that I would dismiss or contradict them. Jake's inconsistency became increasingly obvious, not just to Emma, but to everyone around us. His parents, who had initially blamed me for the divorce, began to see patterns in their son's behavior that they couldn't ignore. When Jake missed Emma's Christmas play because he forgot about it, even his mother called to apologize. "I raised him better than this," she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "That little girl deserves a father who shows up for her." Emma's school counselor, Mrs. Patterson, noted remarkable improvement in Emma's behavior and academic performance. "She seems much more confident lately," she told me during our quarterly conference. "Her teacher says she's participating more in class discussions and has stopped the attention-seeking behaviors we were concerned about earlier in the year." I joined a support group for single mothers that met Thursday evenings at our local community center. Listening to other women's stories helped me realize I wasn't alone in my struggles, and their encouragement gave me strength during moments when I questioned my decision. Maria, a mother of 2, whose husband had also been unfaithful, shared wisdom that stayed with me. "You can't control what your ex does or doesn't do, but you can control the example you set for your children. They're always watching, learning what love looks like from how we treat ourselves and others." Emma began to thrive in ways I hadn't expected. Without the constant tension of Jake's lies and my attempts to manage them, our home became peaceful. Emma started inviting friends over after school, something she had rarely done when we lived with Jake, because she never knew what mood he would be in or whether he would be home at all. One Saturday morning, Emma asked if she could learn to cook breakfast for us. As we scrambled eggs together, she said something that made my heart swell with pride. "I like that you always tell me the truth, Mommy, even when it makes you sad. It makes me feel safe." That comment helped me realize that the pain of divorce was worth it if it meant Emma was learning that she deserved relationships built on honesty and respect. Jake's relationship with Lindsay became public knowledge when Emma mentioned seeing her at his apartment during a custody visit. When I gently asked Emma how she felt about meeting Daddy's friend, she shrugged with 7-year-old pragmatism. "She seems nice, but she talks to Daddy in whispers like they have secrets. I don't like secrets." Even at her young age, Emma was developing healthy instincts about relationships and communication. She was learning to trust her gut feelings instead of dismissing them when something didn't feel right. As winter turned to spring, I realized that Emma and I had not just survived our first year as a single-parent family. We had built something stronger and more authentic than what we had lost. Our little apartment felt more like home than our big house ever had, because it was filled with truth and trust instead of lies and tension. The most rewarding moment came on Mother's Day when Emma presented me with a card she had made at school. Inside, in her careful second-grade handwriting, she had written, "Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth and keep me safe. I love our family of two." That night after Emma fell asleep, I sat in our small living room, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. The path had been painful and scary, but it had led us to a place where we could both be completely ourselves, where honesty was valued over harmony, and where Emma was learning that she deserved nothing less than authentic love. 1 year after I made the decision to leave Emma and I had built a life that neither of us could have imagined. Our small apartment had become a sanctuary of honesty and trust, where difficult conversations were met with courage instead of avoidance, and where love was defined by actions rather than words. Emma, now 8 years old, had grown into a confident, perceptive child who trusted her instincts and wasn't afraid to ask questions when something didn't make sense. Her relationship with Jake had settled into a predictable pattern of disappointment and broken promises, but she had learned to protect her heart without becoming cynical. "Daddy canceled again," she announced one Friday evening, setting down the phone with matter-of-fact acceptance. "He said he has the flu," but I could hear Lindsay laughing in the background. Instead of making excuses for Jake or trying to soften the blow, I simply asked, "How does that make you feel?" "Sad but not surprised," Emma said thoughtfully. "I used to think it was my fault when he didn't come, but now I know it's about his choices, not about me." The wisdom in her words amazed me. At 8 years old, Emma had learned lessons about self-worth and personal responsibility that many adults never master. My work at school had taken on new depth and meaning. Parents often sought me out for advice about talking to their children during difficult times, and I was able to help in ways that came from lived experience, rather than textbook knowledge. When Sarah Martinez broke down crying during a parent-teacher conference because her husband had been caught gambling away their savings, I was able to offer practical guidance about protecting children while navigating adult crises. "The most important thing," I told her, "is maintaining their ability to trust their own perceptions. Don't make them question what they see and hear, just to maintain a comfortable illusion." Emma had become my unofficial assistant in helping other children who were struggling with family changes. Her natural empathy and hard-earned wisdom made her a powerful ally in creating a classroom environment where every child felt safe to express their feelings. Jake's life had spiraled in ways that saddened me, not because I wanted him back, but because Emma deserved better. His relationship with Lindsay had ended badly after she discovered he was lying to her about his finances. He had moved into a studio apartment and was struggling to keep up with child support payments, though he always had money for new golf clubs or weekend trips with his buddies. His parents had finally acknowledged the patterns they had spent years ignoring. During one of our rare conversations, Jake's mother admitted that she had been wrong to blame me for the divorce. "I see now that you were protecting Emma," she said quietly. "I wish I had raised Jake to value honesty the way you're raising that little girl." Emma's relationship with her paternal grandparents had actually improved since the divorce. Without Jake's manipulation and lies complicating their visits, they were able to build genuine connections with Emma based on shared activities and honest communication. The most significant change came in how Emma approached her own friendships and relationships. She had zero tolerance for dishonesty, even in small things. When her friend Maya lied about breaking a toy during a playdate, Emma calmly said, "It's okay that you broke it, but it's not okay that you lied about it. I can't trust you if you don't tell me the truth." Maya's mother was amazed by Emma's mature response and asked me how I had taught her to handle conflict so directly. I realized that Emma had learned these skills by watching me navigate difficult conversations with honesty and grace, even when it would have been easier to avoid or deflect. During our second Christmas in the apartment, Emma asked if she could talk to me about something important. We sat together on our small couch, the lights from our modest tree casting warm shadows on the walls. "Mommy, I want you to know that I'm proud of you for leaving Daddy," she said, her 8-year-old voice carrying a gravity that took my breath away. "I understand now that staying would have taught me that lies were okay. I'm glad you chose the truth instead." Tears rolled down my cheeks as I held my daughter, amazed by her resilience and insight. "Thank you for telling me that, baby. It means more than you know." "Will you ever get married again?" she asked, snuggling closer to me. Maybe someday, I said honestly. If I meet someone who values honesty the way we do someone who treats both of us with respect and kindness. Good, Emma said with satisfaction. Because we deserve someone who tells the truth. That conversation helped me realize that Emma and I had not just survived our family crisis. We had emerged stronger and wiser. We had learned that love without honesty is not love at all, but manipulation disguised with pretty words and false promises. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, she said something that perfectly captured the lesson we had both learned. Mommy, I'm glad you were brave enough to choose a hard truth over an easy lie. It made both of us stronger. Looking back on that Tuesday evening when I heard Jake lie to Emma's face, I realized it was the moment that saved both of our lives. It forced me to choose between comfort and integrity, between maintaining an illusion and protecting my daughter's ability to trust and be trusted. I chose to become a single mother, not because I didn't love my husband, but because I loved my daughter too much to let her grow up believing that lies and love could coexist. I chose to show Emma that she deserved honesty even when it meant walking away from everything familiar and comfortable. The most important lesson I learned is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your child is to refuse to accept anything less than the truth. Emma deserved a mother who would show her that lies are not love, that her perceptions matter, and that she should never apologize for asking questions or expecting honesty from the people who claim to care about her. Today, Emma is a confident, honest, loving child who knows her worth and expects to be treated with respect. She has learned that real love doesn't require her to doubt herself or accept deception. She has learned that truth, even when it hurts, is always better than a beautiful lie. And I have learned that choosing the difficult path of single motherhood over a marriage built on lies was not just the right choice for Emma, it was the right choice for me too. We both deserve love, that is honest relationships that are authentic, and a life where truth is valued over comfort. That's the most important gift I could give my daughter, and the most important lesson I could learn for myself. Have you ever had to make a choice between a comfortable lie and a difficult truth? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve honest love. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult times and choosing truth over comfort. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that you and your children deserve nothing less than authentic, honest love. Stay strong, stay true, and keep choosing courage over comfort.